The shovel hit something that wasn't dirt. Sarah Chen dropped to her knees in the mud behind the collapsed barn, her calloused fingers scraping away decades of Tennessee clay. What she'd thought was just another rotted fence post revealed itself as something else entirely. Smooth, deliberate, man-made. Her German shepherd, Luna, had been digging here for 3 days straight, whimpering and pawing at this exact spot with an urgency that made Sarah's chest tight with recognition. She knew that sound. It was the same desperate whine Luna made during her worst PTSD episodes, when the nightmares pulled her back to Afghanistan. But Luna wasn't her dog. Not originally. The metal object emerged from the earth like a confession. A small, tarnished box with military markings Sarah recognized immediately. Her hands trembled as she wiped away the grime, revealing an inscription that made her blood freeze. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, 2nd Battalion, 47th Infantry Regiment. The same unit, the same deployment, the same woman who died in Sarah's arms during that roadside bombing 3 years ago, the woman whose final words had been about a dog named Luna waiting for her back home. If you're already getting chills, drop a Luna in the comments so I know you're with me on this journey. Hit that subscribe button because this story is about to reveal something that will change everything you think you know about loyalty. Sarah's vision blurred as the Tennessee evening settled around her like a heavy blanket. The air smelled of honeysuckle and approaching rain, but all she could taste was the metallic tang of memory. The barn behind her groaned in the wind, its weathered boards telling stories of a century of storms survived. Luna sat perfectly still beside the hole, her amber eyes fixed on Sarah's face with an intelligence that had always seemed too human, too knowing. The box's latch opened with a soft click that seemed to echo across the empty fields. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, lay a letter addressed to whoever finds Luna. Sarah's hands shook as she unfolded the paper, Maria's familiar handwriting swimming before her eyes. The first line hit her like a physical blow. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and Luna led you here for a reason. But that was impossible. Maria had died overseas. Luna had been a stray Sarah found wandering the streets of Nashville 6 months after coming home. The timing was wrong. Everything was wrong. Unless... The letter continued in Maria's careful script. Luna isn't just a dog. She's a promise I made to someone I loved more than my own life. Sarah's breath caught as she read the next line. Maria had been pregnant, 7 months along when she deployed, forced to give up the baby for adoption before shipping out. The father was listed as unknown on all the paperwork, but Maria had written the truth in this letter, hidden it here in the place where she'd grown up, where her grandmother's farm had been her sanctuary. Luna whined softly and pressed her nose against Sarah's arm. The dog's behavior suddenly made terrible, beautiful sense, the way she'd appeared in Sarah's life exactly when the survivor's guilt was eating her alive, the way she seemed to know when the nightmares were coming, the way she'd led Sarah to buy this specific property, Maria's family farm, though Sarah hadn't known it at the time. The letter revealed more. Maria had trained Luna to find this spot, to dig here if anything happened to her, because buried deeper, wrapped in waterproof containers were letters, dozens of them. Love letters written to a daughter Maria would never meet, documenting every day of deployment, every hope and fear and dream for a future that would never come. But the final paragraph made Sarah's world tilt sideways. The adoption agency was Loving Hearts in Nashville. Her name is Emma Rodriguez Chen, born March 15th. She'll be 3 years old when you read this. Sarah, if you're the one who found Luna, it's because she chose you. And if your last name is Chen, it's because you were meant to find our daughter. Sarah stared at the letter until the words blurred together. Chen. Her married name, the one she'd kept after David left her following her return from Afghanistan. The name she'd used when she'd applied to adopt a 3-year-old girl from Loving Hearts 6 months ago. The adoption that had fallen through at the last minute, when the birth family suddenly wanted contact. Emma Rodriguez Chen. Luna stood up and walked to the barn door, scratching at the wood with the same urgent rhythm she'd used on the ground. Behind that door, Sarah realized, might be the answers to questions she'd been afraid to ask. About why Luna had really come into her life. About why the adoption had failed. About why a dead soldier's dog seemed to know exactly what Sarah needed to heal. Are you brave enough to keep going after this revelation? Write yes or no in the comments, because what's behind that barn door will change everything. The barn door opened with a groan that seemed to echo across decades. Inside, covered by a tarp that Luna immediately began pulling away with her teeth, sat a small rocking chair, hand-carved painted yellow, with Emma written in careful letters across the back. Beside it, a trunk filled with baby clothes, toys, and a photo album documenting Maria's pregnancy. Pictures Sarah had never seen, moments of joy captured before deployment tore everything apart. But it was the final item that broke Sarah completely. A birth certificate with her own signature as witness. She'd been there, in that hospital room 3 years ago, holding Maria's hand as she gave birth to Emma. The memory came flooding back. How Maria had made her promise to look after the baby if anything happened. How Sarah had signed the papers as witness, never knowing she was signing away her chance to be the mother Maria wanted her to be. The adoption agency had lied. Emma was still there, still waiting. And Luna had spent 3 years making sure Sarah would be ready to keep that promise. Sarah's phone rang at 6:47 a.m., jarring her from the first peaceful sleep she'd had in months. Luna's warm body pressed against her side as she fumbled for the device, Maria's letter still clutched in her other hand. The caller ID showed Loving Hearts Adoption Agency, the same agency that had crushed her dreams 6 months ago with their sudden reversal. Ms. Chen, this is Director Patricia Williams. I know this is unusual, but we have a situation with one of our children, Emma Rodriguez Chen. Her current placement, Patricia's voice cracked slightly. It's not working out. The family is requesting an immediate removal. I remembered your application and, frankly, you're the only approved candidate who shares her surname. Can you come in today? Sarah sat up so quickly that Luna startled. Emma Rodriguez Chen. Are you certain that's her full name? Yes, it's unusual, I know. The birth mother insisted on the hyphenated surname. Said it was important for reasons we never fully understood. Ms. Chen, I have to ask, did you know Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez personally? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah looked down at Luna, who was watching her with those impossibly knowing eyes. Yes, she whispered. I knew her. Then you understand why this feels like fate. Emma has been difficult to place. She's incredibly intelligent, but she has this way of knowing things about people that unsettles families. She asks questions about her mother that we can't answer, and she draws pictures of a woman in military uniform that look remarkably like the photos in her file. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. What kind of pictures? Pictures of a woman with a dog. Always the same dog. A German shepherd she calls Luna, even though she's never owned a pet. Ms. Chen, can you be here by noon? 3 hours later, Sarah stood outside the Loving Hearts facility with Luna at her side, both of them trembling for different reasons. The building looked exactly as she remembered from 6 months ago. Warm brick, cheerful yellow trim, the kind of place designed to make difficult goodbyes feel hopeful. But today felt different. Today felt like coming home. Patricia Williams met them at the entrance, her eyes immediately drawn to Luna. My God, she breathed. She drew that exact dog, down to the markings on her face. Through the window of the playroom, Sarah saw her. Emma Rodriguez Chen sat alone at a small table, dark hair falling in waves around a face that was pure Maria. The same determined chin, the same expressive eyes that seemed to hold secrets too big for a 3-year-old. She was drawing again, her small fingers gripping a crayon with fierce concentration. But when Luna barked softly, Emma's head snapped up. Her eyes found the window, found Luna, found Sarah, and her face transformed with a smile so radiant it nearly brought Sarah to her knees. "Mama Luna!" Emma shouted, dropping her crayon and running to the window. "You came back! You brought my other mama!" Patricia's face went white. "She's never called anyone mama before, ever. And we've never told her about you, Ms. Chen. How could she possibly—" But Sarah wasn't listening anymore. She was watching Emma press her small hands against the glass, watching Luna's tail wag so hard her entire body shook, watching 3 years of grief and guilt and impossible hope crystallize into this single, perfect moment. Emma turned to Patricia with the kind of authority that only children possess when they know something adults don't. "This is my mama Sarah. Mama Maria told me she would come when Luna was ready. Can I go home now? The paperwork took 4 hours, but Emma never left Sarah's side. She sat in the plastic chair next to Sarah's desk, one small hand resting on Luna's head, chattering away as if they'd known each other forever, which Sarah was beginning to realize maybe they had. Mama Maria visits me in dreams, Emma said matter-of-factly, coloring in a picture of 3 figures, a woman in uniform, a woman in civilian clothes, and a dog. She said you were sad because you thought you failed her. But you didn't fail, you just had to learn how to be my mama first. Sarah's pen froze over the custody agreement. What else did Mama Maria tell you? That Luna would find the letters when you were ready, that you would understand why she had to go away, and that someday we would all be together again, but different. Emma looked up with Maria's eyes. She said love doesn't die, it just changes shape. Patricia Williams had been unusually quiet during the proceedings, occasionally glancing at Emma with an expression Sarah couldn't quite read. Finally, as they prepared to leave, she pulled Sarah aside. There's something else, Patricia said quietly. Something I probably shouldn't tell you, but Emma's previous placements all failed for the same reason. She would tell the families things about their deceased relatives, specific things she couldn't possibly know. It frightened people. Sarah looked back at Emma, who was now lying on the floor with Luna, both of them completely at peace. What kind of things? Messages, last words, locations of hidden items. One family called us in tears because Emma told them exactly where their grandmother had hidden her wedding ring before she died, a location no one else knew. Another family couldn't handle it when Emma described their son's final moments in a car accident with details that matched the police report perfectly. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. How long has she been doing this? Since she could talk, but it's not random. She only does it when families are grieving, when they need closure. It's like she's... Patricia struggled for the words. Like she's a bridge between worlds. Sarah thought about Maria's letter, about Luna's impossible knowledge, about the way Emma had known exactly who she was. Maybe she is. As they walked to Sarah's truck, Emma skipped between her and Luna, humming a song Sarah didn't recognize. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, and for the first time in 3 years, Sarah felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Mama Sarah? Emma said, as Sarah buckled her into the car seat. Mama Maria wants me to tell you something. Sarah's hands stilled on the straps. What is it, sweetheart? She says thank you for keeping your promise. And she says the nightmares will stop now because you're not carrying her story alone anymore. We're carrying it together. As they drove away from Loving Hearts, Luna's head resting on Emma's lap, Sarah caught sight of something in the rearview mirror that made her breath catch. For just a moment, she could swear she saw a figure in military uniform standing in front of the building, hand raised in a final salute. But when she looked again, there was only empty sidewalk and the golden light of a Tennessee sunset. Emma was already asleep, her small hand tangled in Luna's fur, both of them breathing in perfect synchronization. And for the first time since Afghanistan, Sarah drove toward home without the weight of the dead pressing down on her shoulders. Some promises, she realized, take years to keep, but they're worth the wait. The first night was the hardest. Emma woke up screaming at 2:17 a.m., her small body rigid with terror that Sarah recognized too well. But when Sarah rushed into the makeshift bedroom she'd prepared, she found something that stopped her cold. Emma wasn't alone in her nightmare. Luna was having one too, both of them trapped in the same invisible hell, whimpering and thrashing in perfect synchronization. The loud noise, Emma sobbed, reaching for Sarah with desperate hands. Mama Maria is scared. The ground is shaking and she can't find Luna, and there's so much red. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Emma was describing the roadside bombing, the exact moment Maria died. Details no 3-year-old should know, details Sarah had never spoken aloud to anyone. She gathered Emma into her arms, feeling the child's heart hammering against her chest like a trapped bird. Luna crawled closer, pressing her warm body against both of them, and gradually the trembling stopped. But Emma's next words nearly shattered Sarah's composure entirely. She says to tell you it wasn't your fault. She says you tried to stop the bleeding, but her heart was already flying away to find me. Sarah had never told anyone about those final moments. About how she'd pressed her hands against Maria's chest, feeling her friend's life slip away despite every desperate attempt to save her. About Maria's last, coherent words, "Tell Luna. Tell her I kept my promise." Now sitting in the darkness with Maria's daughter in her arms, Sarah finally understood. Maria hadn't been talking about a dog, she'd been talking about their child. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Sarah was making breakfast when Luna's ears perked up, followed by the sound of vehicles in the driveway. Through the kitchen window, she saw 2 military SUVs and her heart sank. Official visits never brought good news. But the man who knocked on her door wasn't wearing the expression of someone delivering bad news. Colonel James Morrison had been Maria's commanding officer, and his weathered face showed something Sarah had rarely seen from military brass: uncertainty. "Sergeant Chen," he said formally, then caught himself. "Sarah, may I come in? We need to talk about Staff Sergeant Rodriguez." Emma appeared at Sarah's elbow, studying the colonel with the same unsettling intensity she'd shown at the adoption agency. "You're the one who sent Mama Maria away," she said matter-of-factly. "She says you've been carrying her ghost too." Colonel Morrison's face went white. He looked from Emma to Sarah to Luna, who was sitting perfectly still, watching him with those knowing amber eyes. How could she possibly? "Come in," Sarah said quietly. "I think we all have some explaining to do." Over coffee that grew cold while they talked, Colonel Morrison revealed the truth that had been eating at him for 3 years. Maria's deployment had been voluntary. She'd requested the assignment specifically because it came with a substantial life insurance payout and educational benefits that would transfer to her daughter. She'd known the risks. She'd gone anyway. "She made me promise something before she left," Morrison said, his voice rough with guilt. "If anything happened to her, I was supposed to make sure her daughter ended up with you. She had it all planned out. The adoption agency, the paperwork, even Luna's training. But when she died," he looked down at his hands, "I couldn't bring myself to interfere with your grieving process. I thought it would be cruel to burden you with her final wishes when you were struggling so much yourself." Emma climbed into Morrison's lap with the fearless confidence of a child who'd never met a stranger. "Mama Maria says you were trying to protect Mama Sarah, but sometimes protecting people means letting them choose their own hurt." The colonel's eyes filled with tears he'd been holding back for 3 years. "She really talks to her, doesn't she?" Sarah nodded, watching Luna rest her head on Morrison's knee. "More than talks. She carries her. If this is hitting you as hard as it's hitting me, drop a promise in the comments. Because what Colonel Morrison reveals next will explain everything about why Luna knew exactly where to dig." Morrison reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "There's more. Maria didn't just plan for Emma's adoption. She planned for everything. The farm you bought, she arranged for it to go on the market at a specific time, through a specific realtor who had instructions to make sure you saw the listing. The adoption agency's sudden reversal 6 months ago, that was Maria's contingency plan. She knew you'd need time to heal before you could be the mother Emma needed." Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside were documents that made her head spin. A trust fund for Emma's education, already fully funded. A letter of recommendation for Sarah's application to veterinary school, something she'd dreamed about but never pursued. And a deed transfer, making Sarah the legal owner of not just the farm, but the 200 acres surrounding it. "She bought all of this," Sarah whispered. "With her deployment pay, her life insurance beneficiary payout, and some family money she'd inherited. She spent 2 years setting up a network of people who would make sure her plan worked. The realtor, the adoption agency director, even Luna's trainer. They all had specific instructions and timelines." Emma looked up at Morrison with Maria's serious expression. "Mama Maria says to tell you the guilt can stop now. You did exactly what she needed you to do." But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Morrison pulled out a final document, a letter addressed to Sarah in Maria's handwriting, dated just 1 week before the bombing. "She gave this to me with strict instructions. I was only supposed to give it to you after you'd found Emma, and Luna had led you to the first cache of letters. She said you'd know what that meant." Sarah's hands shook as she unfolded the letter. Maria's words seemed to leap off the page. "If you're reading this, then everything worked exactly as I hoped. You found the letters under the barn, you found Emma, and you're probably wondering how I could have planned all of this from beyond the grave. The truth is, I didn't plan it alone. The letter continued. Sarah, do you remember that night in Kandahar when we were pinned down for 6 hours, when we thought we weren't going to make it home? You told me about your grandmother's stories, how she claimed she could see the spirits of soldiers who died far from home, how they would whisper instructions to help their families find peace. Sarah's breath caught. She did remember. It had been one of those long, dark nights when death felt so close you could taste it, when soldiers shared their deepest secrets, because tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. I didn't believe you then, Maria's letter went on, but after Emma was born, after I held her in my arms and knew I might not come home to raise her, I started paying attention, and I realized your grandmother was right. Love doesn't end with death, it just finds new ways to work. Emma slipped off Morrison's lap and climbed onto Sarah's, her small fingers tracing the words on the page as if she could read them. Mama Maria learned how to whisper from the other side, she said simply. She taught Luna how to listen, and she taught me how to remember. Morrison leaned forward, his military composure finally cracking. There's something else, something I've never told anyone. The night before Maria died, she called me, said she'd had a dream about the bombing, described it in perfect detail. The location, the timing, even the type of device. I thought it was just pre-mission anxiety, but she knew, Sarah finished. She knew she wasn't coming home. She asked me to change the patrol route. I refused, said we couldn't make tactical decisions based on dreams. Morrison's voice broke. If I had listened. Emma reached over and patted Morrison's hand with the gentle authority of someone far older than her years. Mama Maria says some things have to happen, so other things can happen. She says her dying wasn't your fault, it was her choice. She chose to save you and Mama Sarah so you could save me. The room fell silent, except for the soft sound of Luna's breathing and the distant call of mourning doves outside the window. Sarah looked around at this impossible family that grief and love and supernatural intervention had somehow assembled. A guilt-ridden colonel, a traumatized veteran, a psychic child, and a dog who served as a bridge between worlds. There's one more thing, Morrison said quietly. He pulled out a small wooden box, carved with military insignia. Maria's personal effects. I was supposed to give these to her next of kin, but she didn't have any living relatives. I've been carrying them for 3 years, not knowing what to do with them. Inside the box were Maria's dog tags, a silver locket with Emma's newborn photo, and a small journal filled with letters to her daughter. But at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was something that made Emma gasp with recognition. A small stuffed elephant, worn soft with love. "Mr. Peanuts!" Emma cried, clutching the toy to her chest. I dreamed about him every night. Sarah opened the journal to a random page and found an entry dated just 2 days before Maria's death. Emma, if you're reading this, it means Mama Sarah found you and Luna brought you all together. Mr. Peanuts was your first friend. I bought him the day I found out I was pregnant with you. He's been waiting to come home, just like you have. As the afternoon sun slanted through the farmhouse windows, painting everything in golden light, Sarah felt the last pieces of an impossible puzzle clicking into place. Maria hadn't just planned for Emma's future. She'd orchestrated a healing that reached across the boundary between life and death, bringing together broken people who needed each other to become whole. Morrison stood to leave, but Emma stopped him with a question that made him freeze. "Colonel Morrison, do you want to come back for dinner tomorrow? Mama Maria says you don't have anywhere to go for Thanksgiving, and families shouldn't eat turkey alone." Morrison's eyes filled with tears as he looked around the farmhouse. At Sarah, at Emma, at Luna, at the life Maria had somehow built for all of them from beyond the grave. I'd like that very much. After he left, Sarah sat on the front porch with Emma and Luna, watching the Tennessee sunset paint the sky in shades of hope. Emma was humming again, that same unfamiliar melody, while Luna dozed with her head in the child's lap. "Mama Sarah," Emma said quietly, "Mama Maria wants you to know something important." "What's that, sweetheart?" "She says the nightmares are going to stop now, for all of us. Because we're not carrying the sadness alone anymore. We're carrying the love together." As if summoned by Emma's words, A warm breeze swept across the farm, carrying the scent of honeysuckle and something else, something that smelled like peace. And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah Chen felt truly, completely home. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the kind of crisp November air that made everything feel possible. Sarah woke to the sound of Emma's laughter drifting up from the kitchen, followed by Luna's playful bark. When she padded downstairs in her robe, she found Emma standing on a chair at the counter, flour dusting her dark hair like snow, attempting to roll out pie crust with a determination that was pure Maria. "Mama Sarah, I'm making Mama Maria's apple pie. She's teaching me." Emma held up the rolling pin triumphantly, completely oblivious to the fact that there was more flour on the floor than on the counter. "She says it was your favorite when you were deployed together." Sarah's throat tightened. Maria had made that pie exactly once, in the makeshift kitchen of their forward operating base, using apples from a care package and a recipe she'd memorized from her grandmother. It had been Sarah's birthday, and Maria had somehow managed to create something that tasted like home in the middle of a war zone. "She also says, you're supposed to tell me the story about the time you two got lost in the desert and she made you eat bugs." Emma giggled, attacking the pie crust with renewed vigor. "Were they crunchy?" Before Sarah could answer, Luna started barking at the front door. Through the window she could see Colonel Morrison's SUV pulling into the driveway, but he wasn't alone. A second vehicle followed, a small sedan with an elderly woman behind the wheel. Morrison climbed out first, carrying a bouquet of flowers and wearing civilian clothes that made him look younger, less burdened. The woman who emerged from the sedan moved with careful dignity, her silver hair pinned back in a style that belonged to another era. She was probably in her 80s, but her eyes were sharp and knowing as they took in the farmhouse, the barn, the fields beyond. "Sarah," Morrison said as she opened the door, "I hope you don't mind, but I brought someone who insisted on meeting you. This is Eleanor Rodriguez, Maria's grandmother." Sarah's world tilted sideways. "Maria told me her grandmother was dead." Eleanor smiled, the expression transforming her weathered face. "I let her believe that. Sometimes it's easier for soldiers to deploy when they think they have nothing left to lose." She looked past Sarah to where Emma was peeking around the corner, flour still in her hair. "Hello, Mija. I've been waiting a very long time to meet you." Emma studied Eleanor with that unsettling intensity she reserved for people who carried secrets. Then her face broke into a radiant smile. "Bisabuela, Mama Maria said you would come when the family was ready to be whole again." Eleanor's composure cracked, tears streaming down her cheeks as Emma launched herself into her great-grandmother's arms. "She talks to you too, doesn't she, Mija?" "Every day," Emma said matter-of-factly. "She says you taught her how to make the pie, and how to braid hair, and how to listen to the voices of people who love us from far away." As they settled in the living room, Eleanor revealed the truth that had been hidden for 3 years. She hadn't died. She'd been in a nursing home, suffering from what doctors had diagnosed as severe dementia. But the day Maria died, something had changed. "The nurses said I started talking clearly again," Eleanor explained, her gnarled hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. "Started remembering things, asking about Maria, demanding to know about her baby. They thought it was a miracle, but I knew better. Maria was calling me back." She pulled out a worn leather journal, its pages filled with Maria's childhood handwriting. "She started visiting me in dreams, just like she visits Emma. Told me about her plan, about you, about Luna. She said I had to stay strong long enough to help put the pieces together." Morrison leaned forward, his expression troubled. "Mrs. Rodriguez, with all due respect, how is any of this possible? Dead people don't orchestrate complex plans. They don't train dogs or manipulate adoption agencies or... Don't they?" Eleanor's eyes twinkled with something between mischief and ancient wisdom. "Colonel, you've spent your whole life following orders. Did it ever occur to you that some orders come from a higher command?" Emma climbed into Eleanor's lap, settling there as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. "Bisabuela, show them the pictures." Eleanor opened her purse and pulled out a small photo album. The first picture made Sarah's breath catch. It was Maria as a child, maybe 4 years old, standing next to a German shepherd that looked exactly like Luna. The resemblance was so striking it was almost supernatural. "That's Estrella," Eleanor said softly, "Maria's childhood companion. She died when Maria was 12. But not before she taught Maria something important about the connection between souls. She flipped to the next page, revealing a photo of teenage Maria sitting in the exact spot where they'd found the buried letters. Maria always said this farm was magical, said she could feel the presence of everyone who'd ever loved this land. When she bought it back from the bank 3 years ago, she said she was making sure love had a place to come home to. You're probably wondering how deep this mystery goes. Drop Estrella if you're ready for the truth that will change everything you thought you knew about life and death. The afternoon passed in a blur of stories and revelations. Eleanor had brought boxes of Maria's childhood belongings, photo albums, school reports, and most importantly, a collection of letters Maria had written to her future daughter, starting when she was just 16 years old. She always knew she'd have a baby girl, Eleanor explained, as Emma pored over the letters with the focused attention of someone reading their own origin story. Said she'd dreamed about her since she was little. Described you perfectly, Miha. Your eyes, your smile, even your stubborn streak. But it was the final box that contained the most shocking revelation. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a small wooden carving of a German shepherd, clearly made by a child's hands. Attached was a note in Maria's teenage handwriting, "For Luna when she comes home." Sarah stared at the carving, her mind reeling. She carved this before she ever met the real Luna? Before she ever deployed, Eleanor confirmed, before she even joined the military. She said the dog in her dreams told her to make it, told her it would be important someday. Emma looked up from the letters, her dark eyes serious. Mama Maria says, some souls choose each other before they're born. She chose you to be my mama, and Luna to be our guardian, and Bisabuela to be our memory keeper. She says love is the only thing stronger than death, because it exists outside of time. As the sun began to set, painting the farmhouse in golden light, Sarah found herself standing at the kitchen window watching an impossible scene. Emma and Eleanor working side by side on the apple pie, while Morrison sat at the table, reading one of Maria's letters aloud, his voice thick with emotion. Luna lay at their feet, her amber eyes reflecting the warm light, looking for all the world like she was exactly where she'd always belonged. It's beautiful, isn't it? Eleanor said, appearing at Sarah's elbow. The way love finds a way to complete itself, even across impossible distances. Sarah nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, and she could swear she felt a presence beside her. Warm, familiar, filled with the kind of peace that only comes when promises are finally kept. The pie was perfect. As they sat around the farmhouse table that evening, sharing Maria's recipe and the stories that came with it, Sarah felt something she'd almost forgotten existed, the warm weight of belonging. Emma sat between her and Eleanor, chattering about everything and nothing, while Morrison carved the turkey with military precision. Luna dozed under the table, occasionally opening one eye to check that her family was still safely gathered. But it was during dessert that Emma made the announcement that changed everything. Mama Maria says this is her last visit, Emma said quietly, setting down her fork and looking around the table with Maria's serious expression. She says her work here is finished and it's time for her to rest. The room fell silent, except for the soft tick of the mantel clock and the distant call of nightbirds outside. Sarah felt her chest tighten with panic. What do you mean, last visit? She says she's been holding on to help us find each other, but now we're a real family, and we don't need her to stay between worlds anymore. Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, but tears were sliding down her cheeks. She says it's time for her to go to the place where soldiers rest when their mission is complete. Eleanor reached over and took Emma's small hand in her weathered one. What else does she say, Miha? She says to tell you thank you for staying strong long enough to meet me. She says to tell Colonel Morrison that he was a good leader and the people who died under his command are proud of him. And she says to tell Mama Sarah— Emma paused, her lower lip trembling. She says to tell Mama Sarah that she kept her promise too. Morrison cleared his throat roughly. What promise? Emma looked directly at Sarah with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. The promise she made in the hospital when I was born. She promised she would make sure I had the best mama in the world, even if she couldn't be here to raise me herself. Sarah's vision blurred as the memory came flooding back, standing in that hospital room 3 years ago, watching Maria hold her newborn daughter with a mixture of fierce love and heartbreaking resignation. The promise Maria had whispered, thinking Sarah couldn't hear. "I'll find a way to give you the mama you deserve, baby girl, even if I have to move heaven and earth to do it." "She also says," Emma continued, her voice growing stronger, "that the nightmares will stop for everyone now. Because we're not carrying grief anymore, we're carrying love, and love doesn't hurt the way grief does." As if summoned by Emma's words, a warm breeze swept through the farmhouse despite the closed windows, carrying the scent of honeysuckle and something else. Something that smelled like peace, like completion, like a job well done. Luna lifted her head and whined softly, her amber eyes fixed on something the humans couldn't see. Her tail wagged slowly, and she made a sound that was part whimper, part greeting, as if she was saying goodbye to an old friend. "She's here now," Emma whispered. "She wants to say goodbye." The temperature in the room seemed to shift, becoming warmer, more welcoming. Sarah felt a presence beside her chair, familiar, comforting, filled with the kind of love that transcends death. For just a moment, she could swear she felt a hand on her shoulder, gentle and reassuring. "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the empty air, "for everything. For Emma, for Luna, for giving me a reason to heal." Emma smiled through her tears. "She says you're welcome. And she says to remember that she's not really gone. She's just changing shape again. She'll be in every sunrise over the farm, every time Luna protects us, every time I laugh like she used to laugh." The presence lingered for a few more moments, and then gradually faded, leaving behind only the warm glow of the dining room and the sound of a family breathing together. But something fundamental had shifted. The air felt lighter, cleaner, as if a weight that had been pressing down on all of them for 3 years had finally been lifted. "Is she?" Morrison started to ask. "At peace," Eleanor finished softly. "Finally at peace." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts, their own memories of Maria. Outside, the November wind picked up, rustling through the bare branches of the oak trees that surrounded the farmhouse. But inside, everything felt warm and safe and complete. Emma yawned, the emotional weight of the evening finally catching up with her small body. "Mama Sarah, can Luna sleep in my room tonight? I think she might be sad about saying goodbye." Sarah looked down at Luna, who was indeed looking more subdued than usual. "Of course, sweetheart, I think we could all use some extra comfort tonight." As they prepared for bed, Eleanor pulled Sarah aside in the hallway. "There's something else Maria wanted you to know," she said quietly. "Something she made me promise to tell you when the time was right." Sarah's heart clenched. "What is it?" "She wanted you to know that adopting Emma isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning. She said you have more love to give than you realize, and this farm has room for more healing than you can imagine." Eleanor smiled, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "She said to pay attention to the signs. Apparently, there are other lost souls who need what you've learned about putting broken families back together." Before Sarah could ask what that meant, Eleanor had disappeared into the guest room, leaving Sarah standing in the hallway with more questions than answers. But for the first time in 3 years, the questions didn't feel overwhelming. They felt like possibilities. As she tucked Emma into bed, with Luna curled up on the rug beside them, Sarah felt a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. This was what Maria had been working toward, not just Emma's adoption, but the creation of something larger, a family built on love and loss, and the unshakable belief that some bonds are stronger than death. "Mama Sarah," Emma's voice was sleepy but content. "Tomorrow can we start planning Christmas? Mama Maria says it's going to be the best one ever because it's our first one as a real family." Sarah kissed Emma's forehead, breathing in the sweet scent of childhood and possibility. "Absolutely, sweetheart. We'll make it perfect." As she turned off the light and headed toward her own room, Sarah caught sight of something that made her pause. Through Emma's window, she could see the barn where this whole journey had started, silhouetted against the star-filled sky. And for just a moment, she could swear she saw a figure standing there, a woman in military uniform, hand raised in a final salute. But when she blinked, there was only moonlight and the peaceful silence of a family finally, truly home. Christmas morning arrived with the first snow Tennessee had seen in 5 years. Sarah woke to Emma's delighted squeals echoing through the farmhouse, followed by Luna's excited barking and the sound of small feet thundering down the stairs. When she made it to the living room, she found Emma pressed against the front window, her breath fogging the glass as she watched fat snowflakes drift past the porch light. "Mama Sarah, it's snowing. Mama Maria said it would snow on our first Christmas, but I didn't believe her because Tennessee doesn't get snow." Emma bounced on her toes, her dark hair wild with sleep and excitement. "She says snow is how heaven says hello." The past month had been a whirlwind of firsts. Emma's first day at the local preschool, where she'd immediately befriended a shy boy named Marcus, whose military father had died in Iraq. Sarah's first parent-teacher conference, where Mrs. Henderson had pulled her aside to mention Emma's unusual gift for comforting grieving classmates. Luna's first visit to the veterinarian, where Dr. Patricia Kim had been amazed by the dog's perfect health and uncanny ability to sense when other animals were in distress. But it was the unexpected visitors that had really shown Sarah what Eleanor meant about paying attention to signs. First had been Marcus's mother, Jessica, a young widow struggling to make ends meet while raising her son alone. She'd appeared at their door 3 weeks ago, tears streaming down her face, clutching a note Marcus had written. "Emma says her mama can help fix broken families. Can you fix us?" Then came Tommy Rodriguez, no relation to Maria, despite the shared surname. A teenage boy aging out of foster care, who'd been sleeping in the old barn until Luna found him and led Sarah to his hiding spot. He'd been terrified at first, expecting to be turned over to authorities, but Emma had taken one look at him and announced, "Mama Maria says he belongs here too." And just last week, Eleanor had moved out of the nursing home and into the farmhouse permanently, claiming her doctor had declared her dementia completely gone. A medical impossibility that everyone chose not to question too closely. Now, as Sarah watched Emma press her nose against the window, she realized Maria's plan had been even bigger than she'd imagined. The farm wasn't just meant to heal Sarah and Emma, it was meant to become a sanctuary for anyone carrying the weight of military loss. "Mama Sarah, look!" Emma pointed toward the driveway, where tire tracks were visible in the fresh snow. "Someone's here." Through the falling snow, Sarah could see a familiar SUV parked next to Morrison's car. The Colonel had become a regular fixture at Sunday dinners, but this was Christmas morning. As she watched, the passenger door opened and a woman emerged, tall, blonde, wearing a military uniform that looked crisp despite the early hour. Morrison climbed out of the driver's side, his face showing a mixture of nervousness and hope that Sarah had never seen before. The woman beside him moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to navigate the world with a prosthetic leg. But her smile was radiant as she took in the snow-covered farmhouse. "Who is that?" Emma asked, but her question was answered before Sarah could respond. Luna had started barking, not her usual alert bark, but the same joyful sound she'd made when she first saw Emma. The dog raced to the door, tail wagging so hard her entire body shook, as if she was greeting another long-lost family member. Morrison knocked softly, and when Sarah opened the door, his companion stepped forward with a smile that transformed her entire face. "You must be Sarah. I'm Captain Lisa Chen, no relation despite the name. Jim has told me so much about you and Emma." Sarah's breath caught. "You're military." "Was. Army medic. Discharged after an IED took my leg in Syria." Lisa's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes showed the familiar shadows of someone who'd seen too much. "Jim thought, well, he thought maybe you'd understand what it's like to come home broken." Emma appeared at Sarah's elbow, studying Lisa with that intense gaze that meant she was seeing more than just the surface. Then her face broke into a smile that could have powered the Christmas lights. "You're the one Mama Maria told me about. The one who saves people but doesn't know how to save herself." Lisa's composure cracked slightly. "I'm sorry, what did she say?" "Mama Maria. She's my first mama who lives in heaven now. She said a soldier lady would come for Christmas who needed to learn that being broken doesn't mean being useless." Emma reached out and took Lisa's hand with the fearless confidence of a child who'd never met a stranger. "She says you're supposed to help Mama Sarah with the new people who are going to come live here." Morrison cleared his throat. "Sarah, I know this is sudden, but Lisa's been struggling since her discharge. The VA isn't, well, it's not meeting her needs. And when I told her about what you're building here..." What we're building, Sarah corrected gently, looking around at the impossible family that had somehow assembled itself in her living room. Eleanor was making coffee in the kitchen, while Tommy helped Emma arrange presents under the tree. Jessica and Marcus had arrived the night before for Christmas Eve dinner and had fallen asleep on the couch, finally looking peaceful for the first time since Sarah had met them. Lisa's eyes filled with tears as she took in the scene. I don't want to impose. I don't know where else to go. The nightmares, the guilt, the feeling like I don't fit anywhere anymore. You fit here, Emma said with absolute certainty. Mama Maria says broken soldiers belong together so they can help each other remember how to be whole. As if summoned by Emma's words, Luna padded over and rested her head against Lisa's good leg, looking up at her with those knowing amber eyes. Lisa's hand automatically went to the dog's head, and for the first time since she'd arrived, her shoulders relaxed. There's something else, Morrison said quietly. Lisa's been working on a proposal for a non-profit, a residential program for veterans struggling with PTSD and survivor's guilt. When I told her about the farm, about what you've accomplished here, you want to make this official, Sarah realized. Turn the farm into an actual treatment center. Lisa nodded, her voice gaining strength. Not a hospital or institution, a home. A place where military families can heal together, where kids like Emma and Marcus can grow up understanding that their parents' sacrifices meant something. Sarah looked around the farmhouse that had become so much more than she'd ever imagined. The walls that had once echoed with her own nightmares now rang with laughter and conversation. The rooms that had felt empty and haunted were now filled with the warm chaos of a family that chose each other every day. Maria planned this too, didn't she? Sarah asked Emma, though she already knew the answer. Emma grinned, her dark eyes sparkling with mischief that was pure Maria. She says the best families are the ones that grow from love instead of blood, and she says this farm has enough love to heal a whole army. If you're feeling the same chills I am right now, drop family in the comments, because what happens next will show you the true power of love that refuses to be limited by death. As Christmas morning unfolded, Sarah watched her impossible family grow even larger. Lisa fit in as if she'd always belonged, helping Eleanor with breakfast while sharing stories that made Morrison laugh for the first time since Sarah had known him. Tommy and Marcus bonded over video games and the shared understanding of what it meant to lose a father figure. Jessica found herself deep in conversation with Eleanor about the challenges of raising children while carrying grief. And through it all, Emma moved between them like a tiny ambassador of healing, offering hugs and insights with the casual wisdom of someone who'd learned that love was the only currency that really mattered. By afternoon, as they sat around the expanded dining room table, sharing Christmas dinner, Sarah realized that Maria's final gift hadn't been just Emma or Luna or even the farm itself. It had been the understanding that healing wasn't a destination. It was a journey best traveled with others who understood the weight of carrying invisible wounds. I have an announcement, Sarah said as they finished dessert. Lisa, if you're serious about the non-profit, I'd like to be your partner. This farm belongs to all of us now, and I think it's time we made it official. The room erupted in cheers and tears, and the kind of chaos that only comes from a family that's been waiting its whole life to be complete. And as Sarah looked around the table at these beautiful, broken, healing people who'd somehow found their way to each other, she felt Maria's presence one more time, not sad or urgent like before, but warm and satisfied and infinitely proud. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the farm in pristine white that made everything look new and full of possibility. And inside, a family that had been built from loss and love and the unshakable belief that some promises transcend death settled in for their first Christmas together. It was, Sarah realized, exactly what Maria had always intended. 5 years later, the Rodriguez Chen Healing Farm had become something beyond even Maria's ambitious dreams. Sarah stood on the front porch of the main house, watching the controlled chaos of a typical Tuesday morning unfold across the 200-acre property. In the distance, she could see Lisa leading a group therapy session under the old oak tree, her prosthetic leg no longer a source of shame, but a symbol of resilience that inspired the veterans in her care. Tommy, now 19 and studying social work at the local community college, was helping Marcus, now 8 and wise beyond his years, feed the therapy horses they'd added 2 years ago. The farm now housed 12 permanent residents, all military families dealing with various forms of trauma and loss. But it was the temporary visitors that really showed the scope of what they'd built. This week alone, they were hosting a widow from California whose husband had died in Afghanistan, a former Navy SEAL struggling with survivor's guilt, and a family whose teenage daughter had been killed in a military training accident. Emma, now 8 years old and still possessing her uncanny ability to see straight into people's hearts, had become the unofficial welcome committee. Sarah watched her approach the newest arrival, a young Marine who'd lost both legs in an IED explosion and hadn't spoken to anyone in months. Within minutes, Emma had him laughing at something she'd said, and Luna was resting her graying muzzle on his wheelchair. "She's remarkable," a voice said behind Sarah. She turned to find Dr. Patricia Kim, the veterinarian who'd become both the farm's official animal therapist and Sarah's closest friend. "Emma, I mean, though Luna's pretty special too." Sarah smiled, watching Emma guide the young Marine toward the barn where the therapy animals lived. "Maria would be so proud of what she's become." "Maria would be proud of what you've all become," Patricia corrected gently. "This place, it's healing people in ways traditional therapy never could." The statistics bore that out. In 5 years, the Rodriguez-Chen Healing Farm had helped over 300 military families find their way back to hope. Their success rate was unprecedented. 93% of their residents reported significant improvement in PTSD symptoms, and 87% went on to build stable, fulfilling lives after leaving the farm. But the numbers didn't capture the real magic of what happened here. They didn't measure the moment when a grieving widow realized she could laugh again, or when a veteran with survivor's guilt understood that living wasn't a betrayal of his fallen comrades. They couldn't quantify the healing that happened when broken people discovered they weren't alone in their brokenness. "Sarah," Emma's voice carried across the yard, filled with the excitement that meant she'd discovered something important. "Come quick, Luna found something." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Even after 5 years, Luna's discoveries still had the power to change everything. She hurried across the yard to where Emma was kneeling beside the old barn, Luna digging frantically at a spot near the foundation. "Not again," Sarah muttered, but she was smiling. Over the years, Luna had led them to 3 more caches of Maria's letters, each one appearing exactly when someone on the farm needed to hear Maria's words of encouragement. This time, Luna's digging revealed a small metal box, similar to the first one, but newer, less weathered. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a single letter addressed to the Rodriguez-Chen family, Christmas 2029. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it. The handwriting was unmistakably Maria's, but the paper was crisp, new, as if it had been written yesterday. "My dearest family," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means the farm has become everything I dreamed it could be and more. It means Emma has grown into the remarkable young woman I always knew she would become. It means Sarah has learned that her capacity for love is infinite and that healing others was always her true calling." Emma leaned against Sarah's side, reading along with the focused attention she gave to all of Maria's letters. "How is this possible?" Sarah whispered. "This letter is dated 4 years in the future." "Mama Maria says time works differently when you love people," Emma said matter-of-factly. "She says love can reach forward just as easily as it can reach back." The letter continued. "I know you're wondering how I could write this letter from beyond death, how I could know what would happen years after I was gone. The truth is, love sees everything, past, present, and future. When you love someone completely, you become part of their story forever, and their story becomes part of yours." Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she read Maria's final message. "Sarah, you kept every promise you ever made to me, and some you didn't even know you were making. You gave Emma the childhood I couldn't, but more than that, you gave her the understanding that love is the strongest force in the universe. You turned your own pain into a gift for others, and you built something beautiful from the ashes of loss." The letter went on to mention specific people by name, veterans who hadn't even arrived at the farm yet, children who would be born to current residents, even Luna's eventual successor, a golden retriever puppy who would appear when the time is right. But it was the final paragraph that took Sarah's breath away. "I want you to know that I can see the future you're building, and it's more beautiful than anything I could have imagined. The farm will grow. You'll help thousands of families find their way back to hope. Emma will become a therapist herself, specializing in helping children who've lost parents in military service. And you, my dearest friend, will finally understand that you were never broken. You were just being prepared for something extraordinary. As Sarah finished reading, she became aware that they weren't alone. The entire farm community had gathered around them. Residents, staff, visitors, all drawn by some invisible signal that something important was happening. Lisa stepped forward, her eyes bright with tears. "What does it say?" Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her. People who'd arrived broken and were learning to be whole. People who'd found family in the most unexpected places. People who'd discovered that love really was stronger than death. "It says we're exactly where we're supposed to be," Sarah said softly. "All of us." Emma stood up and brushed the dirt off her knees, then looked around at the assembled group with the kind of authority that only children possess when they know something adults are still learning. "Mama Maria says this is the last letter," she announced. "She says her work is finished because we don't need her to show us the way anymore. We know how to love each other, and we know how to help other people learn how to love each other too." Luna barked once, a sound of agreement and completion, then trotted over to the young Marine in the wheelchair and rested her head on his lap. The man's face, which had been closed and guarded since his arrival, softened into the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him. As the group began to disperse, returning to their daily routines of healing and hope, Sarah remained by the barn with Emma and Luna. The Tennessee sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that made everything look touched by magic. "Mama Sarah," Emma said quietly, "do you think Mama Maria is proud of us?" Sarah looked around at the farm that had become so much more than a home. It was a testament to the power of love to transcend death, to the possibility of building beauty from brokenness, to the truth that some promises are worth keeping no matter how impossible they seem. "I think she's more than proud," Sarah said, pulling Emma close. "I think she's at peace, knowing that the love she planted here will keep growing long after we're all gone." As they walked back toward the house, Luna trotting beside them, Sarah felt the presence she'd come to recognize over the years. Warm, loving, infinitely proud. But this time, it didn't feel like a visit. It felt like a blessing, a benediction, a final gift from a friend who'd kept her most important promise. The Rodriguez-Chen Healing Farm would continue to grow, continue to heal, continue to prove that love really is the strongest force in the universe. And somewhere, in whatever realm exists beyond death, Maria Rodriguez was finally completely at rest, knowing that her daughter was loved, her friend was healed, and her legacy would live on in every life they touched. Some stories end with death, but the best stories, the ones that really matter, begin with love and never truly end at all.